Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Summer Melt University 2020, virtual Melt University 2020. We've had some great guests, but I tell you what, I've been excited about having Steve Phelps on our podcast. You should be excited too. Amazing leading executive, sports executive, leading one of the most major sports organizations in the country, has graciously donated and given us his time today. It's going to be a great podcast. Listen, re-listen over and over and over as he talks about so many things that are going to be of interest to you as we pursue our careers and career development in virtual Melt U. But Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR, and he joined NASCAR as the VP of corporate marketing in July of 2005. And I had forgotten, or I didn't remember, that he'd been with the organization for 15 years and has risen through the ranks. I was, every time, I've always been a big fan of Mr. Phelps, and every time we're around each other, he's so gracious and generous with his time, and you can feel it through this podcast, the generosity and his touch and the value system. But longtime executive with NASCAR, which is huge. But prior to that, grew up in Vermont, degree from University of Vermont, MBA from Boston College, was an executive vice president with the Wasserman Media Group. That's another name you guys should research. Casey Wasserman, amazing sports executive, has an amazing agency. He's the CEO of the LA Olympics in 2028. Very, very successful. Also had a long tenure at the NFL, the National Football League. And so if you're the CEO of NASCAR, Senior VP of the National Football League, working with Casey Wasserman, as well as he's actually a brand genius. He won a brand genius. And of course, I knew that before he won the award. But so we're going to have a lot of fun today. And Steve, thank you so much for joining our podcast.
It's really my pleasure to be here. I'd actually forgotten the brand genius thing. That is one you can't really you don't want that moniker. It's a very difficult thing to try to make sure that you're humble enough to accept that award. That was a tough one for me. I'm not really much on awards and accolades, particularly when they have the word genius tied to them.
Well, I mean, I got to be honored. I'm saying call with a genius. I mean, that's I've been called a lot today, but I don't think I've been called that recently. But so let's sort of go back a little bit, because we're talking to our kids a lot about things. We're talking about particularly passion. But growing up in Vermont, did you ever see yourself as the CEO of NASCAR? And I want to begin this path. When you went to the University of Vermont, did you have any type of passion for sports? Because you've had some amazing careers and amazing jobs with amazing people and organizations, but did you have a passion early on?
Yeah, so for a point of clarification, the CEO of NASCAR is Jim France. It is not me.
Oh, I just gave you a promotion, Mr.
So you gave me a promotion. That's good. We gave me a promotion at the NFL as well. I was a vice president there, not a senior vice president. So as long as we're going to go with some hyperbole and getting me promoted again and again, I'm for that. So
I will take my commission at the end of this conversation.
But to answer your question, no, I don't. Listen, when you're an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old at the University of Vermont, you're just trying to figure out how you're going to stay warm in the winter.
Right.
It's my career path has been extraordinary, and I've been very, very lucky. You need to be in the right place at the right time, and certainly you hear, hey, you got to make your luck. Part of that has to do with working hard. I did, and a lot of it has to do with just really creating relationships, right? And I think during this kind of this pandemic specifically, the relationships that I've been I had to lean on in order to help our sport collectively kind of get to the next level and get back to racing was something that, I think it's a very good lesson. But again, to answer your question, back in Vermont, or when I went to BC, I don't think you really, I grew up with very humble beginnings, and, just trying to figure out how you're going to make a living. And I love sports. I participated in sports, and I wanted to do something in sports, and I wanted to combine it with business. I'm so old. When you think about sports marketing, didn't even really know what sports marketing was, just sounded like a really good idea, that combining the passion of sport that I had with, this fledgling, hey, I think I want to be in business. And then things just evolve, right? And so my career has been a series of interesting places to work. I worked at Guinness for a very short period of time. I worked for a company called American Home Products right out of business school, where I ended up being a product manager on the Chef Boyardee brand, which is a far cry from sports, but it allowed me to get some basic kind of brand management skills under my belt, which made me more attractive to someone like the NFL, which is where I went after Guinness.
Well, we've talked to a lot of very famous brand managers in these podcasts, and we talk about how, if you look at the term brand management, it's such a misnomer, because you're basically running a business. You're running a product line. You're responsible for a P&L. You're the CEO of that brand. And so a lot of kids were getting feedback. They're like, hey, we never thought about a career in brand management. And if we did, we thought it was more of a marketing term than a business term. So you were American Home Products, Chef Boyardee, Guinness, some of my favorite products. You're the first big foray into the NFL, and you began your climb there. So what was the first job into the NFL?
Yeah, so when I went to the NFL, my career at the NFL all centered around sponsorship, right? So, and really kind of two pieces of sponsorship, both the partnerships themselves once they came on board, but it also had a sales function. So it was really the management of the partnerships, so the, Visas and, Millers and Budweisers and Cokes and, all these major brands. And that was a great education for me. And so I started as a marketing manager there on the partnership side, and then, grew to running that group, again, both on the sales side as well as the existing partner business. And the NFL is a great place to work. It's a great brand. It's got a very large, loyal fan base, very similar to NASCAR. I've been fortunate to work with two sports brands that have really as passionate a fan bases as you could find. And, I think the thing that makes NASCAR just a little bit different on that side is the importance that sponsorship plays in NASCAR is very different than what it is at the NFL. And that's just a fact. It's the dollars associated with the sport, whether you're talking the teams, the tracks, the sanctioning body, are at a different level, and percentage wise, what they mean to the league, as a league for NASCAR versus the NFL, it's just a kind of a different thing. So, but I was, again, I'm just super fortunate to be able to have worked for really two phenomenal sports brands. And then in kind of sandwiched in between there is working at Wasserman and working for Casey. He was nice enough to have me on about 6 weeks ago, and I addressed his entire group. And, he's a good friend, and he had some really nice things to say. And, he's incredibly, talented and a powerful guy, but he does it the right way.
Right.
And so it's I've had a great journey, and I've been very fortunate. But this year has been very different, as you would expect, than any other truly in my career. And hopefully it won't look a lot like that next year or the following year. It's these are you're aging in dog years here. It's every day is a new kind of a new journey, a new opportunity. Lots of obstacles, and we just keep overcoming the obstacles. I've been really proud of my management team and how they've handled things, and the sport more broadly, and how it's come together and collaborated as one.
Well, I could tell you, I mean, you've got a tremendous team, and you just said a lot of things that we want to unpack. We want to unpack obstacles. We want to talk about the speed of things. Another thing that we're trying to do through this program is such with individuals and leaders such as yourself, is we're trying to help our students, because they're going to be a little bit against the eight ball coming out of college now, because it's going to be more fierce competition for entry level jobs. There's going to be because a lot of unemployed people in the marketing services sector would be willing to take lesser jobs, lesser salaries. It's going to squeeze them. And so one valuable thing that we're learning out of this is the value of relationships. You talking about Casey Wasserman and our kids going and looking up Casey Wasserman and all those opportunities, but you clearly, with your path and clearly with your success, the value of the relationships that you've cultivated and you've maintained and you've built and you've nurtured. What we're really trying to educate our kids on now is that, hey, early on, begin building these relationships, begin maintaining these relationships, and talk about particularly in the sports industry. Obviously, we're a giant, big, small fraternity and sorority, but talk about your perspective on relationships.
Yeah, listen, I think they're critical. It's really, and to your point, I think you need to nurture those things early and often. And so your sphere of influence and those that you're touching, continues to grow and to grow and to grow. And mine does as well. Every day there's someone new to have, to create a relationship with and create trust with, and really doing what you say you're going to do is really important. So if you say you're going to do something, go ahead and do it. And I think that can't be overstated. I think the other thing too is, for me, it was very much, treating people the way I wanted to be treated. And I really, I know that sounds kind of silly, and trite. It's really, I think it's really important, because, and doing it when things are difficult, and remaining, composed and not getting heated. And there are ways to do it correctly. And, there's a way to try to find, for me, I'm trying to find a common point or several with whoever I'm talking to, whatever that might be, their love of sports, or, a particular business thing, or where they had come from, or whatever that might be. I think is an important tool in order to try to create someone feeling comfortable with you. And so again, a lot of this just seems like common sense, and it is, but growing your, those that are in your, kind of who they are, and learning what they do. And I think people are, if they have the time, are willing to make time for other people to come into their, into their business life, because that's good business. And adding to, the sphere of those who are, who is just going to help you down the line, because that could be the next job, that could be the next sales opportunity that you have, that could be the next business relationship. Whatever that is, you just don't know where it's going to go. And that's why I think it's really important. If someone says, hey, would you be willing to do X, Y, or Z? My answer is always yes. So if I have time to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think that part of it is giving back. So if it's a young person who says, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time to discuss how you think I might approach, my career advancement, or my next opportunity, or getting into sports, or whatever that may be. If I have time to do it, I will do it. These days I don't have a ton of time to do that, but I will always make time, because, I was there, right? I was there. I was in business school, and I went to meet with a gentleman who was a friend of an acquaintance of my mom's, and he worked for FootJoy in Massachusetts, and I went to see him, and I said, hey, my mom said you'd be willing to have, an interview with me. It was just informational. There wasn't anything there. And he said, listen, Steve, I don't know you. You seem like a bright kid who's got a lot of energy and wants to do well. He said, I don't have a need for you right now. But if you do this, once you go work for a major brand in marketing, in brand management, and then in 3 years, you're going to have the pick of the litter. You can do whatever you want. And he was exactly right. And it was great career advice for me. And so he gave me 30 minutes of his time that made a difference in my life. And so I want to do that for other people too, to the degree I can.
Well, that's what we tell our students, because they don't realize that people like yourself or me, we've been where they are.
That's right.
And we have, and particularly people who have a value based proposition or life, like we want to give back. And so I encourage the students to take that shot, to reach out. But if they do, it's got to be an informed and educated reach out. Hey, Mr. Phelps, and I admire yours with NASCAR, and see you went to Vermont. So they're sending those signals, those positive signals. But you gave me a great segue into the importance and value of developing mentors right now. And because I'm sure as you talk, you've had a tremendous amount of mentors in your life. We all have, because they help, and then you try now to mentor people. But talk to our students about the value of mentors as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's critical. The mentors can provide all kinds of help. They're hopefully advice and sage advice to how you might want to not just develop your career, but what you're doing currently. Like, how can I do my job better? What things should I look to? And it always being introspective of, how do I get better? What can I learn today? What can I learn to help my company? What can I learn to help my own brand? What can I do that makes me more valuable today than I was yesterday? And I think mentors do that. And then they can also hopefully give you, if they're a mentor within your organization, they can help you navigate the organization. If
Right.
they're a mentor outside of the organization, they can give you advice on, hey, listen, you've been at this particular job for 3 years. You should really consider, if you're not moving up, you should consider other opportunities and moving out. None of us is going to anymore. It's very different than it used to be. You're not going to work at one company, get out of school, you go work, for GE for 40 years and then you retire.
Right.
Doesn't work that way anymore. So, we're all going to do a lot of different things, and that's great. It allows us to get a significant number of different, backgrounds and work experience. Some, do you work for a public company, a private company, a not-for-profit, an agency, a brand? I mean, all these different opportunities in sports, frankly, that are unique, that will allow you to grow. But I think, listen, having mentors is a gift. I didn't have a lot of mentors early on in my career, and I've kind of had to forge my way. It's a lot easier now, and the probably wouldn't call it mentoring now as much as it is. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, the early parts of it, I'd spent at least 2 or 3 times a week, Roger Penske and I would have conversations. So,
Wow.
Roger Penske's that's a legit businessman, right? He runs a significant business outside of just sport. And I think it was helpful. I'm not trying to stay super humble on this, and I think it was helpful for him to hear what we were doing, right? And how we were trying to get back, and how we were approaching it, and the protocols that we put in place in order to get back safely, and make sure that, that no harm was going to come to our competitors or our officials or those within what we would call the footprint. So I would say that Roger's a mentor. He is, he's a friend and a business partner, and someone I have a lot of respect for.
Well, and we talk about a lot of this in this process on both sides of the coin. There's got to be a lot of humility in this process. Think about Roger Penske, one of the greatest American businessmen. There is business people. He's seeking advice from you. You're seeking advice from him. It's grounded in humility, grounded in respect, grounded in learning. You're never too old to learn these things. And you hit on a great segue. The title of my book is Building Brand You.
Yep.
Everything that kids are doing now, they possess the tools to build their brands, and build their career. But I think NASCAR, and I'm biased because I've loved it, all my life growing up in Lower Alabama. But NASCAR is a micro, and we're learning a lot about new career opportunities in sports. But I think NASCAR is a microcosm of the career opportunities because like if it's the NFL, there are only 32 teams, but with NASCAR and professional racing, to your point, there are teams, there are sponsors, there are sanctioning bodies, there are tracks all over the country. There's different tiers of sports within NASCAR. There's NHRA and many, many others. And then when you delve into that, there's so many business facets to NASCAR, whether it's the tickets or the data analytics or now the safety of the fans in the stands, or so many areas. But talk about within, because like I said, a lot of students, because there's not automobile racing, like college football or college basketball, so they might not get on their radar as soon. But like I said, I think there's so many career opportunities. Talk about some particularly opportunities for young people to crack in and gain it by advancement.
Yeah. So there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of opportunities, frankly. Um, we do have the good fortune of having a lot of sponsors. Kind of sponsors are the lifeblood of this industry.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you've got sanctioning bodies. We are a sanctioning body for 18 different series, which surprises a lot of people. So
Wow, I didn't realize that either.
yeah, so it's we have 3 national series. Then you've got the Arkham Menard series, which we now own. Modified, our Wheelin, which is local short track racing, and then we've got all the IMSA brands as well, and all the series that are in IMSA, which is another company that we own. And so there's just a lot of opportunities that exist. And then, like other sports, we employ the same functional areas that everyone else has, right? So you've got the kind of behind the scenes things, finance, accounting, HR, legal. You've got your kind of forward facing things that are fan related, marketing, communications, digital, social content. You've got, the at track component of it. So admissions from a ticketing standpoint, analytics and insights. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And those are all opportunities for, frankly, entry level positions. Right. We've got, and some of them are more than others. Right. So our digital team tends to be significantly younger than a lot of our other places. And that's just a function of the roles that we have in that space that would require skill sets that younger people tend to have as digital natives, more so than someone that would be my age. I'd be lost. And that's okay. Fortunately, we have people who are smarter than I am that can figure out how to do that. But there are other things too. We've got a sales academy here that is really kind of outbound calling to ticket holders. And again, those tend to be younger and typically more diverse, right? So we've have a major push within our sport to be more diverse and inclusive. It starts at home, right? It starts with our own employees. We've got to be a leader from the front from this industry. Our industry is fragmented. And if you kind of think of our industry as a 3-legged stool, you've got the sanctioning body where I work. You have tracks. We own a number of our own tracks, but there are others we don't own. And then you've got the teams and drivers. And then around kind of the outside of it, then you've got your media partners. You've got your sponsors. You've got your auto manufacturers. And then ultimately, the widest ring is, and you've got agencies that are involved all over the place, both within the sanctioning body, with race teams. Some are hospitality related, some are strategy related, some are brand related. There are just so many different touch points that you have an opportunity here. If I had to take a guess, the number of people that are employed or touch NASCAR in some fashion is, it's tens of thousands of
Oh
people,
yeah.
and that's each one of those is people feel part of what we would call the NASCAR family or the NASCAR community, and that's how you think about sports in general. So we're just a slice of what that is, but it's all the same thing, right? You're part of a family. You're part of the sports community. You're part of the NASCAR family, whether you work at NASCAR or you work somewhere within within the industry broadly.
Well, we and you just laid it out, because there's so many great career opportunities in NASCAR and the sport of racing, and we've had a couple of executives on from the PGA, and some similarities, because you've got sanctioning bodies, you've got players, you've got sponsors, you've got so many tournaments, you've got so many courses, and what we're trying to do through these podcasts is we're really trying to push these students into thinking out beyond non-traditional. What we've uncovered, in college athletics, is that there's a burgeoning mental health, consultants within athletic departments, and so many areas that you and I, frankly, wouldn't have been exposed to, or that didn't exist when we were on our climb. But at your level, and as busy as you are, and other busy executives such as Casey and all these other people, if somebody is reaching out to you, what gets your attention? Whether it's through a LinkedIn exchange or an email exchange, they write you a nice note. What we're trying to help these kids get to that top 5 percentile, where a guy like Steve Phelps would say, "Hey, I want this individual in my organization. I'm going to push your resume down to my HR and for a consideration." Give us some tricks of the trade, some tips that get Steve Phelps' attention.
Yeah, well, typically for me, there are a lot of folks that reach out. Probably had 2 or 3 just this morning. It really has to do with the network, right? So if there's someone that I know that says, "Hey, I know this young man or this young woman, very bright, hard worker, know his sister or whomever," right? That there's some type of connection, I'm going to be far more likely to say, okay, and either take that call myself or, email that individual and say, I will make sure that our HR folks take a look at this. And that's what networks do, right? So for me, it is hard to break through with the number of folks who are reaching out to me, whether they're solicitations for, marketing help or whatever it might be. It's most of those are I'm not going to respond to. I just get too many.
Yeah, you can.
And then, but as it relates to people, and young people in particular, I would like to be able to talk to every one of the students that is on this podcast. That would be difficult for me to do given my schedule. So, but if there's someone is going to be really thoughtful about how they want to, approach me, that's something that I will certainly, I would be looking for. What that is, I will leave that to creativity. But again, to me, if there was, someone who I have respect for, that they say, "Hey, listen, I've got it." Roger Penske said, "Hey, well, we should really take a look at this particular person for a position. There's apparently an opening for a senior manager in your digital group." Then I would absolutely take a look at that, because I'm doing Roger Penske a favor, right? Or he's trying to do me a favor, whatever that might be. And so that to me is worth my time, right? To reach out via email to whoever that individual is, or to call or say, "Hey, do you have availability tomorrow? I'm open between 4 and 6. I give you 15 minutes to tell me about yourself, and we'll figure out what next steps might look like."
Well, and you just hit the nail on the head. It's mining an emotional connection, finding a hook, finding a relevant hook. So, because not only they're mining that emotional connection, we try to explain to our students every day is that every interaction they'll have with Steve Phelps is a potential audition or a potential job interview. So if they're mining an emotional connection, if they're putting the effort into research that they know you're a graduate of Vermont or Boston College or you've worked for the NFL, those are subtle indicators of how they will be as an employee. And so students, I want you to listen to this and re-listen to it. So let's talk about a couple fun things for a minute. One of my favorite episodes of Undercover Boss was with you. And so I want to, I'm always fascinated with the process. And I know a lot of our students, they love Undercover Boss, they love Shark Tank because they're really, really trying to learn. So tell us about that. I want to know the behind the scenes of Undercover Boss because it's actually pretty cool. And I'm sure it's humbling on both sides of the equation.
Well, I call Undercover Boss the gift that keeps giving. It was 8 days.
Wow.
They shot the kind of dirty secret there is that they probably used about 4% of the footage, which means they shot a lot of footage that was on the cutting room floor. There are 4 jobs that they used on the show. I did 7 jobs, so 3 they did not post. One of my favorite ones, frankly, they didn't use. Or I was posing as an official, and it was kind of I only got outed potentially or only 2 or 3 times where people like, "What are you doing?" Because I was wearing a team uniform or I was wearing a NASCAR official uniform.
Right.
But the one, I'll go back to this funny story. I'm up in the spotter stand and I'm helping one of our officials and I'm working with him, try to get a sense for what he does. And so all of a sudden, the official I'm working with who didn't know me, he said, "Hey, let's go over and say hi to Roger Penske." And I'm like, "Oh no." I said, no, I'm sure Mr. Penske's really busy. That's okay. He's like, no, he's great. You'll like him. I'm like, no, it's okay. So I go over and pull the hat down over my, kind of as low as I could. And, Roger's super sharp. And so the official says, hey, Mr. Penske, this is Kevin Thomas. He's from Vermont. And, he won a contest to come work at different functions in NASCAR. And so he's working with me. And Roger looks at me and goes, "I know you." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I get that a lot." And he's like, "No, I know you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so then we go away and the folks that was there on my team that were working with the show, they went over and, they told Roger and Walt Zarnicki was with him. And it was pretty funny. And so Roger sees me later. He's giving me the thumbs up and it was a funny time, but listen, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I won't have to do it again. It was a grind. You were up at, waking up at 5:30 to film you waking up. I'm like, are you for real? And then I had to do a video diary. One of the nights, was 2:30 in the morning. It was an exhausting kind of dealing. And the hard part of it is I wanted to represent our sport and showcase our sport in such a positive light because it is such a great sport.
You're right.
It's such a great community. And I wanted people to see that. And I know there's a lot of folks like, well, listen, it's reality TV. It's actually scripted. It's not, I didn't know any of the people I worked with, none.
Wow.
And I didn't know their backstory. All they would say is, well, they have a backstory. You have to go get it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? How about you just tell me? They were so annoying. It was, but again, I'm glad I did it. And they make you stay in these terrible hotels. And I stayed on a motor coach here that was the loudest coach ever. I think it was, a 20-year-old used nasty motor coach. And I'm like, I don't want to stay there anymore. And it was pretty funny. So I snuck out one night when they told me I couldn't, and I went and stayed in my condo.
Well, it's one of my favorite shows, and like I said, you really, really learn a lot. And to your point, it was it was very, very humbling experience. And I've had this ongoing debate with, and you don't have as much anymore, but I used to have this debate with like, well, are race car drivers athletes? And I said, these are some of the best conditioned athletes in the world. And there are careers within the conditioning and nutritioning and hydration of these athletes because, they're going at these monster G forces and, hours at a time. I mean, so there's, I'm sure you'll concur with that, and I used to think that I'm like, even these guys on the pit crew, I mean, they're like the Patriots. I mean, they move and I would encourage our students to look at the careers. And so, in closing, and we always like to ask, and we get a lot of great answers, but any go-to books, podcasts, publications, materials that you would recommend to our students so they will be sort of current with sort of where your mind is and how you get yourself informed? Anything you'd like to share?
It's interesting because I think for us, I think it's important if someone is interested in coming to work at NASCAR for any number of reasons, including, hey, there's an opportunity. I think understanding the sport is an important
Huge, yeah.
the history of the sport, what's going on in the sport. So, one of the favorite podcasts that I listen to, and I don't have a ton of time to do it, but I always listen to, Dale Jr.'s podcast because he always has interesting people in the sport, either historical or current, that he's such a great ambassador. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is to our sport. And he just loves it. And he loves the history of the sport. He just wants the sport to advance. He's a good sounding board for me when I'm trying to get a sense for, kind of either a portion of the of the fan base, because he is still so popular and has such a voice. Hearing where his head is at is helpful for me as we are trying to listen and do things to advance the sport. He's a great guy. The gains that we've made over the last month in diversity and inclusion and listening and social justice, he's right there.
Oh, yeah.
And he is wants to lend a voice. He wants to support. He's just a good human being as well, and a friend that I'm lucky to have. And so it's and we don't always agree, right? He may have a different idea than I do, and I'll talk to him about my perspective, and he'll give me his. And most of the time, we'll come out exactly in the same place. And sometimes I will have changed my mind because of listening to him. So that would be one, because I think it's specific to our industry, and I think he just gives a good perspective on it.
Well, and I think that, and I don't know him that well, but in any of my interactions with him, he's got such a great commoner's touch. He's got such a great appreciation for the history. With a name like Dale Earnhardt Jr., he could be any type of personality, but he's just a really humble and sweet guy. And I think that's great advice if you really want to. And by the way, this applies to any subject matter pursuit. You need to know this target. You need to understand this target. You need to, if you want to go into professional sports racing, sports marketing racing, or golf, or agencies or NFL, you have to be informed and influenced of that target, because real fast, people at Steve Phelps level are going to say, no, you're not. You wouldn't make the cut as an employee in this organization. So to our students, listen to, and by the way, Dale he's great. I mean, he's got this great touch with interviews, and he loves it. You can hear the passion. Bookmark him. Roger Penske is one of the greatest American business people, and obviously so influential in the business of motorsports, but many other sports. And then Steve made a great point. There's so many sponsors that drive the sport of racing, and there are so many job opportunities within that. I mean, I have an agency. We work with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is a big sponsor of racing and some other things. And so, to me, NASCAR is a prototypical, really deep and rich place to pursue careers. And so this has been so great today. We're honored that you would share your wisdom and advice with our students. Know you're such a busy guy with so much going on. It's been great of you to join us today. And Steve Phelps, when I gave him promotion, he's the president of NASCAR. And I'm sure I'll be hearing from the France family this afternoon on that breaking news on the promotion. But president of NASCAR, huge career with NFL, huge career with Casey Wasserman. I guess you guys can hear it in his voice. You can hear his attitude. You can hear his humility. You can hear his approach. I want you to listen to this and re-listen to it. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining our students on virtual Melt Summer 2020, because it's really, really, good you'd lean in and help these students and kids during these crazy times we're living through.
Hey, Vince, it was really my pleasure to be here. And, I wish all the students well. You're embarking on hopefully a career in sports. I personally don't think there's a better place to work. You combine that passion of sports that we all have with, great business careers with whatever functional areas that excite you. And I think that's the great thing, right? If you're a finance person or an accountant, that's great. If you're a marketing person, great. If you're, social media and you want to advance that, or content, or whatever that is, that allows you to have both the functional success that you have in an area with just some really cool places of, being in sports. And so I'm so fortunate to be in this part of this sports world, and certainly would love all of you to come on that journey with us.
Well, thank you, sir. And so students, listen, re-listen. Summer virtual Melt University 2020. We roll on.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.